So, good morning. Welcome to the 22nd Queer Film Festival Mezipatra, to our Queer in the Industry event, Film Festivals of the Future. Just a short note about how the debate will look like. First, it will be structured with questions from me, and in the end we will open up to questions, but if there is anything that interests you that you want to ask, like in the middle of the debate, just raise your hand and ask. It's my great pleasure to welcome João Ferreira from the Festival Queer Lisboa, Andrea Inzerillo from Sicilia Queer Film Festival, and Diego Armando Aparicio from Queer Wave Cyprus. And in the beginning, I would like to kindly ask you to introduce your festivals briefly. So we can start with you, maybe.
Well, thank you for being here. The festival in Lisbon started in 1997. It started as part of the ILGA Association. Then it became independent 3 years later. Now it's run by a cultural nonprofit association. It's difficult to 25 years briefly, but you'll get to know it better as we talk. Well, mainly since the beginning we've been sponsored by the Lisbon City Hall, and we started actually at the Portuguese Cinematheque. And we're still collaborating with them, and there were of course some difficult shifts along the way in terms of financing, and also of course depending on the governments we had at the time. I guess that's just to start. And also, maybe to add one thing, 7 years ago we also started the festival in the second city, in Porto. So we're doing that festival now, also the same team. Actually, half of our team is from Lisbon, half is from Porto, but we're doing the festivals all together.
Okay, Angela?
Okay, thank you. The Sicilia Queer started in 2011, so we just realized our 11th edition. And it started from a group of both cinephiles and militant of LGBT community, and it started because there was one big queer film festival in Italy, which is Torino, and there is another one in Milano. But in the south of Italy, at that time, it was almost impossible to watch LGBT movies. Then I think the distribution changed a little bit, and I brought some catalogs of our past edition. You can take them for free if you want, and some t-shirts. We have 2 international competitions, one of feature and documentary films and one of short films, and other non-competitive sections like a section of history of cinema, and a section dedicated to Serge Danet, a section of Italian history of cinema, Panorama Queer, which is a non-competitive section, and one section dedicated to countries that we would like to know more, whose name is Heterotopias, from a text by Michel Foucault, and then we have one retrospective dedicated to an author, and we interview him or her in the catalog and try to focus on his or her work.
Mm-hmm. So Diego, you are the one with the youngest film festival here, so if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely. First of all, just to say it's an absolute pleasure to see everyone here today and to receive this invitation from Mezipatra, because we are very much a baby festival. Queer Wave started in August 2020 during the pandemic, and the decision to put that festival on came in April, late April, so we had like May, June, July, and then the first week of August was when we delivered the festival. It was a purely online edition, and we can have a long debate about the pros and cons of online festivals. But in that moment, I felt that there was something really special going on in the midst of all the isolation. There was this will and willingness to connect, and for the LGBT community to find ways of like coming together. And I think it was a very good opportunity for newcomers to just test the waters and see what they could make of a first edition online. We had 25 films, 9 features, 1 mid-length, 15 shorts, and based on the work we did on the first edition, we were encouraged to apply for the Commonwealth Youth Awards for like development work that focuses on different aspects of sustainable development goals, and we were picked out as one of the 20 finalists for our focus on peace, justice, and strong institutions, they call it. So for us, Queer Wave was always also a peace-building project, let's say, because we were very keen to find ways of bringing the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot communities together. I don't know if people are familiar with the political division ongoing on the island, but there are LGBT ties on both sides, and we were very keen to explore how the two could come together. Our latest edition was a purely physical one, and it happened in September. We had a 10-day run, which was a bit crazy probably, but we can talk about that later on.
Okay, so it's interesting when I see you sitting here. So you, Joao, you're with the most traditional film festival, which has been running like for decades now.
25 years.
Yeah, and Andrea, your festival's just had its 11th edition, and Diego, you've been running just for 2 years, so it's like very nicely divided. And I was thinking maybe we could talk just one more question about the beginnings, about like which people were involved, what were the motivations, how difficult it was, whether you felt like support from the authorities, municipalities, other groups. So if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on that. Maybe we could do it this time chronologically. Yeah.
The older I always get.
Then we will mix it up, I promise. Yeah.
As I said, in the beginning, the festival was, we had a big support from the Socialist Party, who was in the City Hall at the time, and also from embassies and from different cultural institutes. It was interesting in a way because our festival started in a very institutional way, which doesn't happen very often with queer festivals. We started, our opening night was at the Portuguese Cinematheque, so we were also sponsored by them. Also, there's something interesting that I think really made the festival what it is today. When we started in 1997, there was no film festival in Lisbon. It's strange to think about that. There were many film festivals around the country, but there was no film festival in Lisbon. So we had, this really shaped our program, because suddenly we were the only vehicle for a lot of films. So from the beginning, we never had a very strict LGBTQ approach to, let's say, to narrative at least. So this really brought up the festival. And those early years, it was also a time to let the audience know what is queer cinema and how do we define queer cinema. This was something very important in the beginning, because for us it's not just the idea of having a queer narrative in the film. It's also that, or it can be that, but it's mainly how you look at film. It's a queer gaze upon film. So those early years of the festival, we were of course showing new titles. We didn't have competitions by then. We only started competition in our 9th edition. Now we have 5 competitions in Lisbon. We were showing we were doing a lot of retrospectives. I mean, we were the only festival showing François Ozon, we were showing Almodovar. We were doing retrospectives on Pasolini, on Derek Jarman, on Von Carvaj. So we were doing this whole work that because there was no other festival doing it. So this also helped to shape the audience. The festival grew up inside the community, inside the biggest association we had then, ILGA. But also the fact that we were at the Cinematheque and the fact that we were the only film festival made it every film buff, every cinephile went to the festival. And that shape of our audience remains today. It's still community based, it's still political, it's still activist, but it's also a lot about film.
Yeah.
And we managed to put these together in that way. So that was how we shaped it from the beginning. And still today, of course, we still work on retrospectives. And something very important that we also started then, but now we've been doing it much more. For us, it's also very important to create a critical look at films. So something that we always do. We do a lot of parallel events. We published 2 books already with not only Portuguese but foreign authors. So yeah, we still continue to do this work, always based on this very broad approach to what is queer cinema.
Yeah, wonderful, great. So.
I didn't know Joao before 2016, but I think we do the same thing but worse. So now the idea is exactly the same. For example, maybe I can. The festival started with the financial support of the cultural center in Palermo, the Goethe Institute, the Institut Français, and the Instituto Cervantes, with no support from the City Hall.
Okay.
And so at the beginning we had very few money, I think like 3,000 euros.
Wow.
And then the audience, and then we are now funded by the Ministry of Culture in Italy and from the region in Sicilia, and sometimes from the City Hall. Right now we are fighting with the City Hall because we have a very intense relationship, and of course they are friends of ours. They are left wing, but they don't support us. And because we realized the festival in a venue which is a public cinema, and we fight for that cinema to be open all over the year. They don't do that, so we I don't know how to say in English, but we say it loud. We say it loud, and they don't appreciate that, and they punish us, don't giving us money. So that's why in the catalog you can read the text where I speak. I always speak against the administration without any problem, because I think the festival should and maybe must do also this, in order to think about the development of a festival is something political, so it's not just showing movies.
Of course.
And so I think this is our role, and this is what we have to do. And for example, the idea is to question us what is queer cinema, and maybe I don't know how many of you know this French film critic Serge Danet, which was a great film critic who died of AIDS in 1992, and we dedicated a section to him in order to discuss about what can be conceived as queer. For example, when we screen a movie like The Servant from Joseph Losey, that he read in an article on Libération as a film on coming out. The Servant is a film about some prisoners that try to go out of a prison, like
Through the tunnels?
through a tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting and it's very unusual for queer film festival to show some classical movies that has nothing to do with queer themes, but that has a lot to do with queer themes if you can read them in another way. So we screened also movies by Jean-Luc Godard or by, I don't know, other filmmakers, and we try to think about what queer can mean in contemporary cinema, because we think that a lot of movies that are LGBT are not that we also screen are not exactly working in that direction. So the interrogation, the question is what we like to do more, and we don't have answers. We just have other questions.
So Diego, tell us about your beginnings, how the festival came about.
So, you know, when during lockdowns it was pretty much prohibited to like visit each other and stay out past the 3 hours of your SMS. That's how it worked in Cyprus.
Wow.
So I went to a friend's place and they were like breaking all the rules, and they invited us for wine, and I was like, okay. One glass after another, we got discussing, and I was telling them about an idea I had after living in London and seeing, you know, what an LGBT film festival looked like, at least from Flair. That was my experience. And I thought, you know, what would happen if Cyprus were to have its own? Because I at least saw that there was like a very big gap in the market. Often enough, art house LGBT titles are not profitable for mainstream cinemas, multiplexes to screen, and Cyprus is dominated by multiplexes, so there was no like space for these films. And then it just became a matter of whether or not other festivals would select such films. And in a place as small as Cyprus, that doesn't leave too much scope for screening these. And I think it's important for these films to have a public screening, you know, for people to be able to say, I'm going to attend this screening and watch it just like people watch any other film. So that was the idea behind it, I suppose. And my friends were like, okay, you should do it. You know, even if you don't get any funding, there are definitely gonna be filmmakers, at least for short films, that would like to, like, you know, send you their films and have a screening of this. And by coincidence, there was a program that was opening calls from the Youth Board of Cyprus, and it was for pilot initiatives, so projects in their very first edition, let's say, or form. And we just took that opportunity. I spoke to a few friends about it, and there was a childhood friend of mine who was very vocal about, you know, helping the community and everything. He's our web designer to this day. But he also does a lot of other things, because I think the roles are often, you know, overlapping when it's a small team. And, you know, we brought a designer on board and someone who helped us with the production side of things. We sent out an application, and practically all our, almost all our funding came from public funds. So the Youth Board of Cyprus being one of those, and the rest, bits and bobs came from cultural institutions and the usual places like Goethe Institute and so on. So yeah, we went, I should say at this point, there was a lot of a movement going on online at the time because no one was out and about. And other festival professionals were always sharing knowledge about how they were, transferring their festivals from physical ones to online editions. And having recently attended a festival development course, I saw a lot of that going on social media, and I thought this is brand new to them as well, even if they've been doing it for years and years. Why not give it a shot?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the first one happened. Happy to answer any other,
Since we've covered like the past of these festivals, I wanted to ask whether you have any questions right now that you would like to ask before we move on to the next part of the discussion. Mm-hmm.
I would like to follow up on the. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the Italian guy.
This is Andrea.
Andrea, yeah. I think you opened a very important discussion of what is queer cinema. So, how do you go about this concept of queer cinema? I mean, when it comes to your programming, so what do you consider queer cinema or not?
Yeah, this is the question, and I think we are looking for something that is queer, not only for the content, but also for a way of telling stories. So, independent movies are often more interesting than commercial ones. And for example, when we screened a lot of movies of this Brazilian director whose name is Gustavo Vinagre, which I think experiments a lot on the form also, not only about the content of his movies, but also about the form. And this is, I think, the path of a research in act of queer cinema that interests us. Then when I watch, for example, a movie like, big movies, but for example, just the movie by Catherine Corsini with La Facture.
We screened this on
the opening.
Yeah.
That I loved really a lot. I think is she made other lesbian movies and so on, but this is a movie like what Ken Loach also does. Is a movie on capitalism and not on LGBT themes. That means that you don't have to screen it, not at all. You have, and I really enjoyed it and I loved it. But I think that it depends on the programming and on what you want to do. Yeah. You can take one or another path in order to the whole program of the edition. And then of course it depends on many other things. If they give you the film or not, how much it costs, and if you have the subtitles or not, and so on. So it's many things together. But for example, we screened a lot Xavier Dolan among the LGBT film festival screened Xavier Dolan at first since until Mummy, I think, no? Then,
Do you hate Xavier Dolan?
I can understand. No, of course. But we thought that we should do
of
this.
course, yeah.
And then, right now, maybe Xavier Dolan don't need a festival like ours anymore. He has a distribution in commercial cinema, so I just need to do another work.
What you said about the practical aspects is also very true. I haven't introduced myself in the beginning, I just realized. I am Kateřina and I'm a member of the programming team at the festival, so I really, this hits home when you say that, like sometimes you want some movie and you just can't get it, and sometimes difficult programming decisions need to be made. And we had an interesting debate yesterday with Diego over dinner, because I checked the program of his last edition and they screened the Radu Jude film, Bad Luck Banging, which won the Golden Bear at Berlinale. So if you could maybe say why pick this film again, because I felt like it was very interesting what you said yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember, getting accreditation for the online European film market in March and starting to watch things that were eligible for the Teddy Award, because obviously I was scouting for an LGBT
Of course,
festival.
that's what we all do.
Yeah. And of course, Bad Luck Banging was not eligible for the Teddy Award, but I got around to watching a few other titles and that was one of them. And I remember very distinctively how frustrated I felt with the struggles of the protagonist. So
maybe we can summarize. It's the protagonist, she's a high school teacher who makes a sex tape with her husband, and the sex tape gets online and the school starts investigating and she's kind of fighting to keep her dignity. Yeah.
And she's actually like called on trial at a teacher's parents meeting at her school, and the debate is whether she is morally capable of teaching the younger generation, or if her having made a sex tape makes her a bad teacher. And it becomes more and more evident throughout the film that she's a perfectly capable teacher, but society's hypocrisy is basically getting in the way of her doing her job and having a sexual life that is not restricted to her private sphere specifically. And I thought, based on what a lot of the debate happening around LGBT issues is like, often we have to defend whether our sexuality is something that strictly needs to remain within the private sphere of our lives, or if there is some extent to which it can occupy a public space. And I think the film was touching on those themes very, very, just on point, and it really resonated with that experience of mine. And I think that's why we ended up choosing it. But it's also because of what the other two panelists mentioned. It's also about the language a film uses, and I think Radu Jude is a very, very daring and bold filmmaker, and he's like, the whole grammar he uses to put the film together, it feels like you're watching 3 different films. And there was just something there that felt very Q+ from the LGBTIQ+ acronym, so we went with it.
For example, if I can add something, I watched and I really wanted to screen a movie by a French director whose name is Jean-Gabriel Perriot, who made a movie about a novel from a French philosopher whose name is Didier Eribon, Retour à Rennes. It was in Cannes. Yes, it was in Cannes.
Yeah.
And is a great movie. They are both homosexual, if I need to say that. But the movie is about gender gap. Is about women and class struggle throughout the history of France. It's an amazing movie. An amazing movie. They didn't give us. I don't know why. Often because they say, no, this is not queer. And I say, okay, don't worry. I I want to explore what queer can mean, and also, and I think it's a very brave and intelligent work that can talk to queer community and to the audience in general. And within a queer film festival, it could even make more sense than in other film festivals.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, maybe I would, going back to the question on how would we define queer cinema? I think it's always a good exercise to look back to what was happening in the beginning of most queer festivals. In the 80s and in the 90s. You had also, of course, this had a lot to do with AIDS, the AIDS epidemic. We started calling this certain kind of film that had a gay narrative. We called it gay cinema. What was happening was, of course, there were other filmmakers not inside this kind of structure. But what was happening was that the kind of films that were being produced were they were by white, gay, middle, upper class men telling their stories. And this was, also in the 80s and in the early 90s, you started to see a reaction to this kind of film. Which is now we call queer cinema, and of course with the movement to new queer cinema, that actually the first film would be Gus Van Sant's Mala Noche from 1985. There was a big difference here because these young filmmakers at the time, what they did was they started looking at all the minorities, all the excluded people, not only focusing on their sexuality, but focusing on issues involving migrants, like Gus Van Sant film with a migrant from Mexico, looking at all the different minorities. And what they started to do was to, on one hand, they were turning these stories universal. They were not just talking about these people that had this specific problem and no, they were telling stories, of course, specific stories, but that would resonate to all of us and that were much more political in that way. And a very important thing, I understand, and we all understand the kind of films that were done during the AIDS epidemic, but they were films that were washing the sexuality part. They were representing themselves as asexual in some way. So this new wave of film brought again the sexuality, the freedom to use your body as you wish. This on the one side, and on the other, they were looking back at history. They were claiming their history as queer people. So this really, I think, is what fuels what we can call queer cinema today. It's something that has to be very broad. It's something that cannot discriminate. It's something that has to include every viewer. Mm-hmm. This is really the important part. As a viewer, I can, whatever my origin, race, my sexuality, whatever, I do not feel excluded by this film, and I resonate in some way with what is being shown on screen. So this is, and of course, this issue has been, for the last years, the big issue has been also with the trans representation in film, with having trans actresses and actors, and also trans filmmakers. We were also talking a bit about this yesterday. This is the kind of, this I think is what fuels the idea of queer cinema. So it's much more the way you look as part of the creative process, a filmmaker, a screenwriter, actor, everyone involved. It's really the way that you look, I would say, at the world, much more than anything else. Yeah. It's not looking on the inside. It's really looking at the outside.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to add anything or ask anything now? Okay.
Hi. If you want to make a new queer festival and you're on micro budget, what are the most basic, most essential elements you should think about and not save money on? Please, like, share your experience. Maybe if you're brave enough, also share your mistakes, but learn from.
Maybe you can begin lessons.
Okay, I'll just start by saying that as a festival, we were very adamant from the beginning that if people work for the festival or like, you know, get involved in the nitty-gritty, we should be able to like give something back. So it was very important for us to have some sort of budget and not just go at it, you know, without being able to compensate people for what they're doing. Having said that, there are always people who are willing to put in time and you know, give you their energy and so on, like who love cinema and who want to be part of the project. So I think it's important to make an effort to find some funding, because it might be your first edition, but what you're doing might be a lot more important and special, not just for you, but for the community surrounding you, and you should really make, you know, a point of that to the people you're reaching out to get your funding. I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, so if there's any other specific thing I could touch on, I mean, I would say you could start small with the curation. It doesn't have to be like a huge thing at first. And what I said before is still true, you know, a lot of short film makers would more than love to have their films shown and wouldn't necessarily expect, you know, a screening fee in return. Again, we do, as a festival, aim to give everyone a screening fee because we think it's the least we can do, since, you know, I don't know, there's a lot of effort and struggle in making these films. But it's also important to find a venue, right, if you're speaking about a physical edition. So we were lucky enough to find one for our recent edition that didn't require any rent. They were more than happy to provide it, you know, just because they wanted to support the project. And that can save you a lot of budget as well. And then when it comes to the technical support, I guess, if you find a venue that already has some equipment, you don't need to rent out other equipment. Stop me if I'm saying things that are not relevant to you, though.
Thank you so much. But do you think it's essential to invite filmmakers, or maybe organize a competition with an award or something, or is it not that important?
So in our case, obviously this wasn't relevant in the first edition because it was online, although we did have some Q&A sessions through Zoom. So inviting them over physically, flying them over and covering the costs, is that what you're asking? We kind of had this conversation yesterday. It's not something we have done to a large extent yet, but in our physical edition that just happened, we aimed at least to bring over local filmmakers. Not all of them were based in Cyprus, so some of them we did fly over and our budget did allow for that. But we're talking about 5 films and not everyone attended from abroad, so it wasn't, you know. But I think the other panelists will have much more to give you on the awards and so on, because we're not doing that currently.
For example, the competition, we have 5 competitions. We're funded by City Hall, and our main sponsors are City Hall and the Ministry of Culture. the contract we have with the Ministry of Culture, they only fund a film festival if they have competition. So every festival that's funded by them has to have competition. Also, I have to say competition reduces costs, because once you choose a film for competition, you lower the fee or even goes down to zero just because it's in competition. But then it's always good to have a prize that is, of course, good. One of our main prizes is offered by the public TV channels. They buy the film. They buy the TV rights of the film, which is a high amount. So yeah, that's something that helps a lot with the budget. And then, for example, in our festival, our team, we are all paid and we all have contracts. That's something that's for me, it's how it has to work. Mm-hmm. But of course, I mean, we've been running for 25 years. It's a different structure. But that's something that I think is very important. And then, I mean, the other costs are, things changed a lot. In the beginning, the biggest nightmare was film transportation. Mm-hmm. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of euros, because we were working with 35 millimeter and the beginning of Betacam and digital, which would arrive and would not work because on the airplane they lost, it demagnetized, or it was an absolute nightmare. And that was the big chunk of the budget. Now it's zero because it's digital. I mean, now we have huge hard drives, and that's the investment we made, and now we don't spend money with that anymore. So I mean, it really is. You were asking about starting a festival. It's very different today. I mean, I would say it's much easier now. You really just have to put your effort into it, and because these festivals are community driven. I mean, it's something that you start forming a team, and you start making connections, networking, and as you said, start with a small curation, and then hopefully it will grow, and you set also your priorities and what you're doing.
If I can add something about in our case, for example, it was very important since the beginning to be an international film festival. So it has been important to have guests from other countries. Meetings like that to meet other programmers or other festival or filmmakers and so on, made our programming during years. So, for example, people that I met in Berlin or in Lisbon or in Manchester, by speaking to them, I had some ideas, and the ideas changed and so on. So this is essential to a festival to grow up, I think. Then for the question of workers' rights, it's I totally agree with what they said, but we are the worst example in the world, because we are all volunteer, and for example, we try to put a little amount of money. For example, I'm a teacher in high school, so I have a salary, so I don't pay me in order to pay others. But it's not a model. It's crazy. It's just crazy. But without that, the festival wouldn't exist, because the budget of our festival is around 40,000 euros, which is nothing for medium film festival. There are festivals that I don't know. The salary of 2 persons for a year is like that. So it's impossible. You have to make choices. We choose to invite people, not all the filmmakers, of course, but some of them, and also some other people that are involved in cinematographic industry, like critics, like programmers, distributors, and so on, in order to understand also and to improve our work.
Can I ask you just, did you manage with the difficulties of being a film festival also for the community, but also for the filmmakers and cinephiles, and how did you find to manage it correctly, maybe? I don't know if you did understand me.
I don't, sorry.
If you had a thought of being a film festival only for the community or also for the film professionals or cinephiles, and where to find the
balance,
right,
maybe?
yes.
If I can very quickly answer, you should never build a film festival for one specific group. It's I just think it doesn't make sense. As a cultural event, you are open to every, and you have to cater to every kind of audience. Of course, the audience you don't want will naturally not go to the festival because it's not their thing. But it's I understand what you're saying. Basically, in terms of community, and this is something that we have to rethink every year, because I mean, also we're 25 years old, so it's we have an audience that is of course has been going since the beginning of the festival. It's an older audience, but also there's the young crowd that we need to attract. So this is something that we have to do by putting new members on the team, younger people, because also, I mean, for me as a programmer, it's also challenging. This is true. I watch some films, and I don't understand the language. I don't understand what apps and all these kind of things, and even the language. How the younger crowd are speaking. So this is very important that you also have a relationship with young associations that are somehow involved with the festival, and that you get a feedback from what are their problems, what are they interested in, and what is their feedback. So this is something that you always have to balance along the way, and every year it's there's some kind of new challenge that you have to face, and of course you always have to look at all those, mainly those two sides, the community, because your festival is community based and it caters for that community, but also for filmmakers in general, any sexuality. I mean, the festival is of course beyond that. So you really have to find the balance. And I think the point is that you try to get as much different people involved, and having them participate in the festival in some way. That way you learn. I mean, I'm learning every year.
Would you like to add something?
I would agree with João on that. It's very important to open up your festival to more than just one type of audience. But I feel that because of perhaps the theme of the festival, there has to be some sort of conscious effort to bring something to the community, for sure. But when it comes to communicating your event to the outside sphere, it always has to be evident that you are welcoming other, like, people outside the community as well. Because otherwise, you're just preaching to the choir, and you're making an event about the people who you expect will be interested, but that's just like insulating. I feel so it's much more interesting to create this exchange and bring people from outside that as well, and I'll leave it there. So there has to be an element of that, but for sure, at least for Queer Wave, the curation is always about finding ways of including everyone, basically. like if you brand yourself as an LGBTIQ plus festival, then you have to be making some effort to be bringing films that represent the spectrum, in my humble opinion.
Also, I would just add something that I was remembering now. What I was saying, it doesn't mean that we're programming films to please everyone.
Yeah.
Sometimes, on the contrary.
Yeah.
I mean, we've screened films that I know will have 5 people in the theater, and I'm perfectly okay with that, because I know those 5 people, maybe 3 will leave, 2 will be left, and they will be probably the best film they've seen in their life. That to me is perfect. So it's important not to fall in this kind of danger that you're just choosing films that will please a greater audience. No, it's good to challenge the audience, and that's the kind of work we always want to do. Having more challenging films, and also forcing the audience to confront themselves with some strange aesthetic, with some strange narrative to them, and to maybe start this kind of this other kind of film starts growing in them, and they start to see something different there. So that's also really important.
Okay, while preparing for this panel, I read an article called Queering Film Festivals, History, Theory, Impact by researchers Lian Dawson and Cordelois, and I marked one sentence that I will read. Of the nearly 400 festivals that have been founded since Frameline in San Francisco, 270 are currently active, as many folded due to insecure funding structures, political problems, and/or precarious working conditions resulting in festival organizer burnout. So you probably know where this question is going. I would like to ask you about the biggest challenges that you are right now overcoming while organizing your festivals, and what are the ways you try to overcome these obstacles and challenges? Who wants to start?
Shall we start with Andrea?
Of course, money. The problem is always money.
Yeah.
The problem is always to don't disappear after 3 editions, because
How did you manage that?
we strongly wanted to do this festival.
So personal effort
Yes.
and sacrifice.
But this is the problem, because it's next year it will be my 10th edition as an artistic director. I would like to give space to other people, but I'm afraid that if I go, the festival will close. Because nobody will do as much work as I do for free. And we don't have money to pay someone to do this, and this is the problem of the festival.
That's very bleak. Do you see any way out of this?
International, I don't know what to say, funding, money from Europe, something like that. But for example, the media funding, I think just 3 festivals in Italy take it, because it's too complicated. It's too much. I think they give at least 200,000 euros. So they need you to have a market of it. It's too complicated.
So it's only useful for bigger festivals, and hard to get your hands on when you are small.
Yes. So you have to try. For example, we this year, for example, we organized something for an international colloquium organized by the University of Palermo. So they give us 5,000 euros, because they had money, but they didn't know what to do with that money. So, okay, we are here. We are ready to organize something. And we did some screenings and some meetings with filmmakers and and so on, and that is essential for us. But it, you know, it popped up like 1 month before our festival, and we didn't know how to do. And right now, I know that the region of Sicilia gave me for the festival we already did 10,000 euros less than I expected. So the problem is what I will do next year, because we always do the festival of next year. Italy is a complicated country, and so what we will do, less guests, less movies, and unfortunately the few people who are paid will be paid less.
Okay.
We've had all the experiences.
Yeah.
You talked about burnout. Well, it happened to me because there was a period in the festival during our 8th, 9th, and 10th edition. I was also a teacher. I was a teacher for 10 years in a row. So I was teaching, and I was doing the festival with 1 or 2 other people. And 2 of those editions was almost zero funding. So yeah, I mean, mental health is an issue. I had a big breakdown, and I'm still suffering from it today. So it's something that I will carry for the rest of my life. And so something I decided at a point was that no, I mean, we're not going to do this festival in this way. We have working times, we have contracts. We're lucky we have funding. I mean, it's of course we can do that now. I don't know if next year we can, but we've been able to do it for at least 10 years now.
So we made kind of a transition to like this more formalized structure.
I mean, it didn't depend on us only, but we started getting funding. Then the Socialist Party went to government and City Hall, and so everything came together, and we have a stable funding that allows us. I mean, I can say you were saying you have 40. You work 40,000. I mean, ours is over 120 something thousand euros. So I mean, we can do it. We can have this structure. And for me, it's the quality of the work space and your quality of life now is an absolute. It's something that cannot be touched. That cannot go back. It's really very very important, because I mean we had all those experiences, and it's very exhausting, and it's not. Yeah, we shouldn't kill ourselves. I mean, we love what we do, but we can't.
This is the discussion in all of the film industry right now, I feel, not just with the festival organizers. Yeah, that's interesting. So,
Did you want to? No. I think both of you touched on very, very important bits. One is, how do you divide the work between people that you feel confident can deliver? It's what you're saying about passing it on to someone else. And 2 is, what are the working conditions? And I completely agree. It is something that the film industry is talking about right now. And it's an important discussion to be having in the whole cultural sector, because there's this tendency to make it look like everyone is sacrificing themselves for the arts, and no, it's also how people earn a living, and it should be done in the right conditions. And if we're still using outdated models, then we definitely need to do something about that.
Of course.
And I mean, I haven't been doing it for as long as either of you have, but it definitely puts a strain on you. If you're running a festival without the right team, or with a very small team, it can definitely have consequences, let's say, on your life work-life balance, whatever that is. And
Sorry, Jim, just to say something. I mean, from my experience, and I know a lot of festivals. I'm friends with a lot of festivals, mainly in Portugal. You don't need a big team to do a festival. If you have, I mean, we're 5, the festival 6, 7, and I see festivals with 20, 30 people, and it's total chaos. I mean, their catalogs don't come out on time. There's problems with screenings. It's total chaos. You don't need a big team. You need a small team with a salary, working together as friends, and so that's really something that to me is absolutely essential. And also talking about this crossover and what you do, to me, everyone working has to be a film programmer, or if they're younger, a potential film programmer.
Everyone participates in this.
People doing print traffic, people doing press, everyone is a programmer. So mainly, the festival is composed of a team of programmers.
How did you came to
And they
this
all
realization?
program, except the younger ones, not on the first year, not on the second, maybe on the third year. If they stay, they will start programming. Because to me, I cannot look at the festival as a business. So to me, it's very complicated to think that we have an accountant, that we have someone dealing with print traffic only. No, it happens sometimes. I'm not against it, but for me, the ideal model is this: everyone is there for film and to do a film festival, and they're also professionals in other areas that's what they also do in the festival. So this to me this is to me a very important artistic base, and also of course it's only something you can do with a smaller team. Yeah, but that's been our model for many years now.
If I can add something, it's about what we as a team are thinking always is to create conditions that are still not present. So our past is starting from 2,000 euros. Our present is 40,000 euros. So we all are trying to work to make the festival a presence with salaries and so on. So the idea is that maybe our efforts will be, I think it's the story of every film festival, maybe our efforts will be useful for someone that I don't know, because I don't have to choose who will be my successor. My idea is that in my hometown there is an international queer film festival which does an important or an interesting work, and that, I don't know, Angelo Acerbi can come and be or you or other people that I don't know can be paid and do and continue the work. This is the goal. Someone has to suffer to do this, or at least in these conditions, we didn't find another way. But of course, it's not the model we want to keep. It's the model we want to overcome. Well, I don't know.
Would anyone like to ask something? Okay, so now like the necessary question of all this year's festivals, if you could elaborate a little bit on the effects the pandemic has had on your festival, and maybe not just the negative ways, which I'm sure there are plenty, but maybe there's something that you discovered that you would like to take with you to the upcoming editions of your festivals.
I can start, I guess. So I would say that I would start by saying that Cyprus was relatively lucky when it came to the restrictions with the pandemic and everything. I say that because we did have our lockdowns and everything, but there were also periods where things were very open. And so, for example, when it came to our second edition now in September, it wasn't so much of a fear that, oh my God, you know, we might get cancelled, you know, from day to day. I think there was some degree of confidence that it was going to happen that time, and, you know, but obviously when it came to the first edition, I would say the pandemic actually acted as a catalyst for the festival to happen, because it's where everything came to a standstill. And, you know, at the time I had just moved back to Cyprus to give film production a go, and I was working on sets to get some experience. And of course, March, April was when the lockdowns were still in effect, and none of the filming I was meant to be doing was happening. And so, you know, I had this opportunity of concentrating all my energy and efforts into something else that I found really meaningful for the local film industry, or, you know, and that's how it came about, essentially. So I think in our case, the pandemic was probably, yeah, I don't want this to sound like Stockholm syndrome, but it was probably a great thing for our festival, to be honest. I don't think we would be here if it hadn't been, yeah, that way.
The pandemic affected us in the sense that we had to postpone the 10th edition of our festival and reduce it, but we conceived a book on European queer cinema, inspired by a book that Queer Lisboa did for his 50th edition, I think, on Portuguese queer cinema. And so we tried we said to ourselves, what have we done until now? We have some international relationships, so maybe I can ask to some of the programmers, the scholars, the critics, to help us to know better what is queer cinema in 2020 in their country. And so I have this research that is ending. I'm waiting for the last contribution that will be published as a gift for ourselves, but also as a tool for others to explore what is queer cinema in Europe, because I think that maybe if new queer cinema had was something really important during the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s in the United States, there is now a European queer cinema that deserves to be explored better and that we don't know so much. So the idea was to ask to people, I know some Portuguese filmmakers, I know some German filmmakers, but I don't know them all. And I'm sure that you don't know all the Italian filmmakers and so on. So the idea is to share like a map on contemporary queer cinema. And this project will be published, I don't know when, but it will be.
Well, we also had the physical editions, most of them. Our festival is in September, and we were lucky enough to that both in 2020 and this year, the cinemas reopened. So we did the festival with much more restrictions on the first year. With 50% capacity, people could not stay inside the cinema. They would just go inside the theater, the screening room, and have to leave directly to the street. This year was a little better. We could be inside the space of the cinema. Well, it was a very depressing edition in 2020, precisely because of that, because we had our slots, we needed a 1+ hour space between slots so that the theater could be disinfected. So we were there the whole day inside the cinema, and I mean, we were always, of course, always coming out on the street to talk to people, and we had to gather outside, there was no other way. But bringing the big issue, which is the online, the online thing. In March 2020, when we had the lockdown started, we didn't know, of course, what was going to happen, and we were preparing the festival. And on that period, of course, we were talking to the other festivals what they were going to do, and we made the decision right then that we would not have an online festival. So I talked to our main sponsors, to City Hall, to the Ministry of Culture, and this was, of course, being discussed also. We were lucky because the Portuguese government and most of city halls all over the countries that were said that to all cultural institutions that were funded by them, that the money would still be paid even if their event is cancelled. And so we took that decision that we would not do the festival online, and we explained that because I have to say I don't understand what is a festival, an online festival. Because the very base in what the festival is built is on a shared experience, community experience, filmgoer experience, and watching a film is not an individual act. I know that nowadays, and this is the big challenge that we have, now it's just about the individual. Everything is built around, now we can get philosophical now about this, but our society is going more and more into this, the idea of only the individual. But we have to fight that and go back to this community experience. And no, a film festival online is not a film festival. It's I don't know, it's Netflix, it's whatever. It's watching a film on your phone. What is it? It's not the same. If you don't have, watching a film is not something, appreciating a film, being critical about a film, ideally is not something you do alone. It's something you do in a shared room. Because it's a shared experience, it's the shared energy and this black box watching light on screen. And you get the reactions, you get the emotions of everything. You're learning from what the experience is at the same time of all those people. If it's 400 people or if it's just you and another one. And even if you're alone in a movie theater, it's much different because your concentration is absolutely different than watching it on screen. And also I don't think it's fair to filmmakers to have this obligation to have their films screened online, because you have to watch a film ideally from beginning to end. I mean, you can leave if you don't want it, and if you hate it, of course, leave. You should, but it's not they deserve the concentration of watching the film in the ideal conditions. It has to be watched, which is from beginning to end, with ideal sound, with everything. It's not stopping it to go.
Yeah, as you said,
put your chicken in the oven or whatever. It's.
But I think
I'm very radical in this way. I'm very anti-online. Maybe I don't know where this.
I think the word idealistic.
I'll change my mind.
That the word idealistic is like important here, because that's the ideal, but
we have to be idealistic.
Yeah, but yeah.
We have to be idealistic always. There's no other way.
Well, I totally agree with him. I totally agree with him. And I'm Angelo Cervi from the Lawrence Festival in Torino, and they tried to force us to do the online edition in 2020, And myself as programmer, head programmer, and the festival director, we said no, we just waited until it was time to do it. Of course, we had to move it from April to October, and then again from April to June, whatever, but it was, because I totally agree that, especially our festival, especially gay festival and LGBTQ festival, near the community. It's a moment, at least in Italy, for the community to gather together, to meet each other, to meet new people, to check that they are existing and that they are there. So being able to provide a space where the people can come, see movies, discuss, fight about movies, fight with us about movies, whatever, we don't care. But at least there is some vital element in it that cannot be found online. I mean, probably big festivals, they have another structure, another machine, another financial machine on there, so they have to happen. At a certain time of the year, they cannot move. I can imagine that Berlin can now decide to wait until September to do it, even if they did it. But
yeah, they found a solution for it.
Yeah, no. But you know, a queer festival needs to be physical. It needs to be physical. It needs to be, I mean, we need a confrontation with other people. We don't. I mean, I can watch a movie at home, but who cares? I mean, who cares? I mean,
No,
it's our work.
Yeah,
It's our work, but that's
it's our
something
work.
else. That's something else.
Yeah,
That's something else.
exactly.
Also, for me, it's as a programmer, it's sometimes very difficult, and I have doubts about some films that I watch because I really feel the need to watch it on a big screen in a theater because it's a different experience. I mean, it's not ideal, but I mean, we have to work like that. There's no other way. But watching films to program on my computer I'm always questioning that. How would the audience be reacting right now? What would people be laughing at?
If I can, for example, at the opening, it was incredible. No,
It was really beautiful.
I think I had already watched the movie for a part of the movie, and it was a completely different experience. And for example, in Lisbon, I had the chance that year they organized a retrospective on Derek Jarman, and if someone is confident with the work of Derek Jarman, you know that there is a movie called Blue, which is a blue screen and so on, which is always 2 lines in the books. You have to experience this in a movie theater. It's incredible. And
there's no other way.
And there is no
There's
other
no
way.
other way you can watch it. I mean, it's on DVD, but
It's impossible.
There was a question, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a similar comment from the point of view of the filmmaker. So yesterday, last night, it was the first time that I watched my short film on the big screen, and it is a film that has already traveled. It was at the Lovers Film Festival in June, I think. And
What's the name of your film? Sorry.
The Call. Amarios
It's from
Faras.
Cyprus.
Yes,
yeah,
it
It's
yeah.
from Cyprus, yes. So it was at Queer Wave as well. So we had a discussion with Diego when it was screened there, because I live in London, so I couldn't be in Cyprus, whether we would have, a Zoom panel discussion. And I was so sick and tired of it, because my film premiered at Drama Film Festival last year, and so it basically traveled in many film festivals, but most of them were online. So yesterday, watching my film on the big screen for the first time and with live audience around me, I mean, feeling the pulse of the audience, their responses to the jokes and to the drama, it was an amazing experience for me, and I think we cannot take that away from. And this is what I agree with speakers, this is what film festivals are about. It's about the buzz, the atmosphere, film as a social event, this is how it started anyway, from the beginning. And
I'm really glad to hear that you managed to enjoy the screening. Yeah, but there's the wider discussion about this as well, you know, because when we talk about accessibility, which obviously also is an issue, in that case the online edition or hybrid edition can manage to bring the movies to wider audiences, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
I have something to
a painting,
Sir?
any art object.
Uh-huh.
It's a problem of accessibility.
Yeah.
Every art object, painting, sculpture, architecture, theater, and it is. I mean, we can look at it that way, that it excludes because you're not there to watch that, but it's how it works. I mean, maybe you don't have access to Van Gogh's Sunflowers, but you have access to other paintings. In film, it's the same thing. I mean, you have access to what is there for you in your cinemas, in your city. If you're lucky, you can travel, you can watch other things. So, I mean, to me, just the fact that a film can be put online, to me, is not enough. It's not an excuse, and I mean, like prints, paintings, you put it on books. Of course, that's how we learn art history. That's how we get to know the world. So we can. I mean, there are these other ways, but it cannot replace the experience of the live object, whatever art form it is. And film is an art form that was built for this specific device. So again, I may be a little too purist in this sense, and I'm not opposed to listen. I'm not opposed to Netflix or people doing films for TV. I mean, but that's the medium. That's the medium. If they're made for that, and they're really, I mean, we've been experiencing since 6 Feet Under. How overwhelming, or Twin Peaks, how overwhelming it can be to watch good TV, but they're thought for that format.
But yeah, who gets to decide that, you know?
The creator. Who
That's
creates
ideal.
who creates the object? Of course, he's the filmmaker. It's his work of art. A team, but the team he's coordinating. I mean, if that's the decision of the filmmaker, well,
Can I just intervene? Like I feel like I want to throw out some ideas, and I completely get the sentiment, but it's not just sentiment; it's a whole way of viewing, you know, cinema as an art form, and I completely agree that the how tactile the experience is. It's very different, basically, being in a cinema, but I do have to play devil's advocate here. And say that for the longest time, for example, you couldn't watch these films in Cyprus at all, you know, at all. So naturally, you know, a lot of people would access it, I say a lot, but, you know, would access it illegally, let's say. Is that a better way, you know, of watching films? And at the end of the day, a festival is also there to, I feel, you know, suggest something. So if you're doing the curational bit of the festival, you're already saying, this is kind of what I would like to share, or like the programming team would like to share with an audience. And fair enough, it's not under ideal conditions. And, you know, having done the physical edition, purely physical edition this year, we would never ever, you know, substitute that with an online one. But I feel that the online vehicle in that moment in time, because of how everyone
of
was,
course, I mean, but that was an exception. It was an exceptional
No, absolutely.
state that we lived in.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, it felt like a stepping stone of sorts, you know. It's like it didn't matter if you didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle to put on a first edition. And I think no one would have given us funding for a physical edition last year. When they thought, you know, it's a new initiative, it's LGBT, it's this, it's that, you know, whatever they, if it were pitched as a physical one, people would probably say you're crazy, this is not gonna happen. You know, so I'm not an advocate for online film festivals at all, but I do think that when there is like a huge gap and there's no way of accessing specific films, it's one step at a time. And yeah, but you know, you also touched on the will of the creator, and it always makes me think of Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. I remember how adamant he was about wanting to get it out to a theatrical release and not just a Netflix release. And I remember him tweeting, you know, if you do watch it on Netflix, use these exact settings on your television so that the sound and the picture is exactly what I intended it to be. So it's a really interesting thing because at the end of the day, it is a compromise even for the filmmakers, you know.
No, I mean, now it's a question of survival for many of them.
Yeah.
Either they work with these big, because I mean the film industry is disappearing, the Hollywood industry, it's being replaced by Amazon and Disney and all these online platforms, and of course things are going to change in that way. Yeah, but the issue of access is a whole different debate.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, there's a culture now that with the internet, there's the idea that we have to have access to everything. We don't. We don't. The world has lived without access all its existence.
Yeah.
I mean, there were ways. Films. I mean, we would buy films by catalog, and also. There are always ways. So I prefer, in that way, I prefer piracy.
Does this bring any questions?
About piracy?
Well, let's not get into that, maybe.
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying I prefer piracy in the way that I mean when when I was 20, a friend would record on a VHS a film from he was in Holland or in England, and he brought me the film, and I watched it. No, I'm not talking piracy in that way. I mean, in the 50s, people were having access to porn by catalog.
Yeah.
And they had 16 millimeter cameras to stream them with their friends. Hey, do it! Jerk off to it. It's a great experience.
If I may add something, I think that the issue about online or on-site festivals is that the festival itself is an event, and the event is made by in a short time frame of some days, with physical places to go to meet, to experience people, movies, or whatever it is. And online, you can call it an event, but it's not the same thing, because it's
obviously.
And another thing is that in Italy, after the first lockdown, there were many festivals that they were done only online, because everything was open but cinemas and theaters. And there were tons of festivals they enlarged their program at the maximum capacity possible of their budget, and they bombed totally. Because people were so watching a festival online, a film online from a festival, or a film online from Netflix, for yours is exactly the same thing. You don't feel the specialty, you don't feel the specificity of that screening different from another one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing that is very difficult to replicate. Making a festival online instead of that on-site. Then, of course, if you have to do it, you have to do it, and it's not a snobbish say, oh, well, I don't want to do online because I'm too cool to do the online thing, I want to do the on-site thing. Of course, I do what I can. But sometimes, if you can choose, I would suggest to wait until you be able to do the event that you wanted to do. Decided to do like a mixed version of it.
The experience in Lisbon was exactly that. There was one of the other big festivals that decided to do it online in April, I think, this in 2020. And then what happened was all the other festivals, the cinemas opened in August, so all the festivals in Lisbon were glued together. We were all, I mean, one finished 2 days after the other one, 2 days after the other one. But hey, the audience was there and people were going.
Yeah, the social aspect of it is really important to me.
No, absolutely.
Okay, we are slowly approaching the end of our panel, and because it's called Festivals of the Future, I wanted to ask you what your hopes for the future are.
Wow.
Very broad question, you can approach it in an angle you feel is comfortable for you. Do you want to begin?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that a very important next step for us would be finding the right team. As Joao said, perhaps it doesn't have to be a big team, but it has to be the right team for the next edition or the next few editions. And being a baby festival, I think there are a lot of ways we can go about things. So it's exciting to see if we end up, keeping the 10-day duration, if we end up keeping the location. We did it in the capital, close to the buffer zone in Cyprus. So it would be interesting to see if that stays or it shifts and the festival travels perhaps. I think that's it from my side. Yeah, there's a lot of development to happen and things to explore, basically.
And there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's important for a festival is to keep the structure. We always have the same sections and so on, so to be recognizable from the audience. But I also love to change and to experiment. This year we decided to divide the festival into 3 parts, which is something that we will never do anymore, but which was an interesting way to challenge the situation. And the audience came, and it was really interesting because it was daring to try to invite 3 times most the same people, no? It was good. Then I agree that a festival is an event and it should be in a concentrated period and to keep the exceptionality of the situation. And so I don't know, I hope to be surprised by the event, by what the festival will be, and for sure in presence.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I'm forbidden by my therapist to think about the future. So what I'll say is, I mean, we've been through so many changes in our festival. I'm not afraid of what's going on, but I think we should all be afraid of what is happening in Europe right now. So we don't know. We have no idea of where everything is heading. So it's unfortunately, we're heading for some very uncertain times. As for the festival, and I think for every queer festival, you have to be very aware always of what's going on in your local community and in the world, and you have to constantly adapt. And this adaptation is in every sense. It's in budget. It's in your film program. So you have to, and in the structure of your festival, you have to be humble enough to every year rethink the festival and see if it makes sense to continue with this or that structure, or do you change anything? And always be very aware of what's going on, because what I find really scary is to see a lot of film festivals and not just queer, but any film festival and events that seem to be completely unaware, politically unaware of what's going on. They create a kind of closed bubble, and so yeah, I think this awareness is really what we need in the future, and be ready for whatever is coming.
Yeah,
I'm not optimistic.
You should say that to your therapist.
Well, he knows.
Okay. If there are not any last questions, I would like to thank you all so much for being here for this wonderful
Thank you for
debate.
inviting us.
Thank you.